This story is called A Trip to the Airport with Pop. I was about 13 years old, And Pop, I don't know why he wanted to go to the airport, but now there's more than one airport there in DeLand, Florida, and there was a little old airport. I can't remember why he wanted to go there. I think he wanted a piece of aluminum or something. I can't remember exactly why. Anyway, me and him, we hopped in the car, and I was only about 13. I didn't drive at the time, so he did all the driving. He wanted to go to the airport. So I thought he was going to go to the big airport. He didn't. He went to this little airport. It was a landing strip that was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was just like one landing strip. And you could tell it had been put down with asphalt, and it had been there for a long time. You had to go down a dirt road to get to it. And if you've ever seen the movie Tin Cup, you remember the driving range they had? It was out in the middle of nowhere, and the guys played golf there and everything, but they were like buddies and everything there. And it was just like one of these places that's out of the way, and nobody uses it anymore. A little bit. They might use it a little bit. Like one plane might land a year there. But everybody knows everybody there, and it's like a friendly place, that's like good old boys go there to hang out and stuff, That's what this place was. It was one of these places out of the way. You drive down a dirt road, and then this is it's a real airport, though. Real airport, They had a hangar there, believe it or not. And they had a big building there, where the old fellow that run the place was. And everybody was friends. Everybody knew one another. So Pop went driving in, and he parked his car. Evidently, he called the owner of the airport ahead of time. Told him he was coming out and what he wanted to look for. I think it was an old piece of scrap aluminum or something. Some part or something he wanted. I can't remember exactly what it was. So we drove out to the airport. We drove down this dirty, dusty road, and we parked our car, and we walked in. And they had the one long landing strip there, and it was asphalt, and you could tell it had been laid years earlier. There was cracks in the asphalt. There was a few little weeds growing up here and there through the cracks, and then there was a field there and everything. They had a nice big long field. It was adequate, really, to land like a Piper Cub or a Cessna or even a twin-engine plane if it was a smaller one, It was an adequate airport. So we went driving in, we went walking in, and the old fellow that run the place, first off, we knocked on the door, and there's all these dogs barking. So I said to Pop, it's okay? And Pop says, yeah, it's okay, come on. And the old fellow come up to the door and let us in. And there's these dogs running around all the place, running around inside the place, And there was like parts laying everywhere on the floor, and it had a counter there and stuff, and some chairs, and it was like, wasn't neat and tidy or anything like that. It was like almost like a scrapyard. Anyway, so I'm walking through, and these dogs are like sniffing at my legs. I said, what kind of dogs are these? He said, they're pharaoh hounds. One of the oldest dog species on earth, he said. They're a lovely dog. And they were quite well behaved, considering there's about 4 of them there, There's these dogs running around anyway. So I walked up to the counter, and the old fellow said, come on, sit down for a minute, let's talk, And he sat down with my father and me, and we were chatting and stuff, about this and that. I can't exactly remember the conversation, but I remember the building, what it was like inside, it was dusty here and there, and you could tell it hadn't been cleaned in a long time. It was a real man's place, There was airplane parts, and there was engine on the floor, I think, if I remember right, and there was the counter, was all covered with stuff, papers and stuff, and the air smelt musty in there, It smelt like the windows hadn't been opened in a long time, and the windows were all dirty, and there's dust all over the windows, So anyway, we were in there chatting for a while, me and Pop and the old fella, And I think the old fella made himself a sandwich or something, you know, or he offered us a beer or something, you know. I couldn't drink beer, and so I sat there. I think he offered my dad a beer. I think my dad, if I remember right, I think my dad had a beer, you know. And sitting there chatting for a while. And then this knocked on the door. And he said the old fella's name. He said, come on in, come on in. He knew this guy that was coming in. So the guy come in. And I looked him up and down. He didn't look all that old. He looked old, but not really old. He looked like he was about 70, you know. That's what he looked like. But what was unusual about this guy was, you know, he was dressed nice and neat. He had his pants all tucked in, you know, and had I think he had a checker shirt on, and it was all tucked in, you know, and he dressed nice and neat, and he was a very presentable looking man, but he had this towel over his shoulder, one shoulder. And the towel was all dirty. It was absolutely filthy, the towel. It was all covered with stains. These brown stains, spots all over the towel. These brown-looking stains, you know. And on his shoulder, he had a great big parrot. It wasn't a small parrot. It was a big parrot on his shoulder, the old fella. He come waltzing on in. And he stood there, and the owner of the airport greeted him, and he introduced him to us. He said, I can't remember what his name was now, but he says, I'm going to say Bill, because I can't remember his name. He says, this is Bill. And he says, this is his parrot. And he said the name of the parrot. Now, I can't remember the name of the parrot either. And he says, I want to introduce you to Bill and his parrot. And he says, his parrot's over 100 years old, he said. Right? And he said, Bill's over 100 years old. And I'm going to swear to you, it must have been the Florida weather and maybe good food or everything else. He only looked about 70. You know? He said, Bill's over 100 years old. His parrot's over 100 years old, he said. Now, I don't know if parrots really live that long or not, you know? But that's what he said. He says, we're 100 years old. He said, Bill's over 100 years old. Now, I don't know if he was kidding with me or what, or kidding because I was a kid, you know. Maybe he was pulling my leg. I don't know. But he said he's over 100 years old, and he said that his parrot's over 100 years old. And there's all these poop stains all over the towel, going up and down his back on both sides of the towel. We're all covered with poop stains, where the parrot pooped on the towel. So anyway, so he got the parrot to talk. The parrot knew some pretty nifty words, you know. And so we all sat in there, and the dogs were all sniffing around on the floor and stuff, and some of the dogs went over and laid down. The old fella, he went over to the counter, you know, and there's a loaf of bread there. He reached inside, and he grabbed about 4 slices of this loaf of this white bread. He bundled it up in his hands in the balls, made balls out of it. He threw it down the floor, and those dogs gobbled it up so fast it wasn't even funny. They loved it, you know. I think that was what he gave him for a treat. So the old fellow said to me and my dad, he said, you two fellows, he said, you want to take a look at my airport, he said? He said, feel free, just go out that door there, and you can go out and take a look at the planes and stuff, you know. He said, I'll be waiting right here when you get back, and I'll show you the part you're looking for, to my dad, you know. My dad said, sure. He said, come on, and I went along with Pop, you know. I went out the door, and we went out in the airport. We started walking out the runway. And like there was one plane way down the other end of the runway. And I think it was green color, if I remember now. It's been a long time, many years. I mean, this is like 40 years ago, you know. Over 40 years ago. And I think it was like a Piper Cub or something. Way down the other end of the airport, you know. So we started walking down toward that end. My dad was really interested in that little Piper Cub. I think it was a Piper Cub. He was walking down toward it. You know, and I was interested in the 2 big planes inside the hangar. There's a couple big planes inside there, bigger ones, like nice big ones, you know. So the old fella had come out behind us. He was walking behind us, and he was about maybe a couple 100 feet behind us, and he was walking real slowly. You know, he had the dogs, and he was kind of petting the dogs and stuff. So I went walking up, you know, to this big plane. I was looking. First I went over, and I was underneath the wing, reaching up toward the bottom of the wing, you know. And it was a pretty good-sized plane. It was inside the hangar. Dust all over it and everything. Dust all over the wings, you know, and there was all kinds of parts on the floor and tools laying around, you know. Obviously, they'd been repairing it. And on the front of the plane, it had this great big engine. Big propeller. One single propeller, but it was a big plane, quite a big plane, you know. And the engine had these cylinders all the way around the circle around the engine. Must have had like 10 cylinders or 12 cylinders all the way around the engine in like a circle. Great big propeller. The propeller stretched out about 6 feet on either side. And one end of the propeller was down toward the ground. You know, so I went walking up, you know, and I was looking up at this big engine. I mean, it was a monster. Big monster of an engine, you know. So I guess the old fellow's kind of watching me, you know. So I kind of reached up to grab the end of the propeller, and he says, "No!" He says, "Don't touch that!" He yells. He says, "That engine's hot!" You know. He says, "Don't touch that propeller!" You know, he's yelling over at me, you know. I pulled my hand away, you know. I didn't know for beans. You know, he says, "If you'd spun that thing," he said, "that wing would have chopped you to pieces," he said. "That engine start up," he said, "and chop you to pieces," he said. I didn't know. I said, "Oh, gee whiz, you know. I didn't know that." So, anyway, he says, "Yeah," he says, "listen," he says, don't touch that propeller, whatever you do." He says, "That thing is hot. That engine's hot," he says. "It's ready to go," he says. "You pull on that propeller," he says, "that thing's going to start." You know, he says. I didn't know. You know, it's just a kid, you know. Anyway, so I went walking up to where my dad was, up the other end of the airport, you know, up where this plane was. And we had a good time looking around, looking at the plane and stuff, you know. So the old fellow, I think he kind of enjoyed having a little bit of company out there at the airport that afternoon. So anyway, me and my pop, you know, we looked around some, and I think my father found the part he wanted. Some aluminum part that he wanted for his repairs he was doing at home. And that was the end of that story. I went with my pop. We got in the car, and we drove on home. I think we stopped at a place on the way home called if I remember right, it was called Papa J's. Now, I'll tell you about Papa J's. It was a chicken place, you know. You could pay I think it was $3.50. All you could eat fried chicken. And they had this pudding for dessert. And they had some mashed potatoes you could have there with it. Mashed potatoes and gravy. And they had some green beans and stuff like that. And it was an all-you-can-eat buffet. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know where they got their chicken. But their chicken breasts. They had these chicken breasts at Papa J's, along with a lot of fries and other stuff. You know, they had a lot of other stuff. They had a few desserts there, too. They had this dessert that was really good. It was like brown raisins mixed in with a pudding, like. It was like a pudding dessert. And if you took that and put a little bit of milk on it, oh, was that ever tasty. Nice tasting pudding they had. It was like some sort of a bread pudding or something with raisins in it. It was really good for dessert. But their chicken, let me tell you about their chicken. The pieces of chicken, the breast meat, they must have weighed 2 pounds each. They were the biggest pieces of breast meat. I mean, thick meat on them, meaty breasts they used to have there, breast meat. And their chicken was really good, you know. I mean, I'll tell you what, right now, thinking about Papa J's chicken, and I haven't had it in 40 years. And my mouth's starting to water right now, just talking about it, you know. I mean, it's been a long time. I'm going to tell you a little story about the buffets down in Florida, you know, back in those years. You know, most of the buffets back in those years were only $2.50, $3.50. They were along in that price range, you know. And they used to have some wonderful spreads and buffets. I think the next story I'm going to tell you guys is about a fellow that I used to work with, down in Florida, and we used to always go to the buffet every day. And, I'll tell you how that happened, on the next story. It's very, very funny, Anyway, listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye, guys.